Morning, guys. Beautiful sunrise going on behind me. I'm out here with Peter and Rosie, just on a morning walk. It's a little smoky, as you can see. So usually I don't bring my phone on morning walks, but I brought my phone this morning because I wanted to record a video for you guys. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Virginia Schmidt from Divinity School, a community that I founded to bring people together who are looking to consciously bring more divine power and energy and experience into our human beingness, into our human experience. So what I wanted to talk about this morning was I wanted to give a shout out to my friend Lindy for recommending the book Hands of Light by Barbara Brennan. I'm sure a lot of you guys have heard of it before. I'm sure a lot of you guys have heard of Barbara Brennan. I actually hadn't until Lindy told me about her. For those of you who don't know, Barbara Brennan is a former astrophysicist who was a researcher for NASA. She wrote, she later became I believe a therapist, at least a counselor, but I believe a psychotherapist, or at least studied a lot of psychotherapy. And eventually wrote this book, Hands of Light, which became a sort of a worldwide phenomenon. And then she eventually founded a school, which basically as soon as I heard about Barbara Brennan and was like, wow, here's someone who's really blending science and spirituality. Here's someone who is teaching people how to heal themselves. Go on, Panter. Peter would like to join us. He's panting though. I'm sure you can hear him. And so she actually has a 4-year program, mostly based in Florida, but that I am to become a healer, that I'm very interested in. So I really want to thank Lindy for turning me on to that book, which I'm now listening to on Kindle. And I really want to thank my friend Susie, who's bringing me as a surprise today, the day after I started the audiobook. Susie is coincidentally synchronistically bringing me a physical copy of Hands of Light. So I'm excited because there are lots of diagrams. And so what I wanted to talk a little bit about today was just tying in, I've only just started the book and I look forward to continuing to share with you guys, but tying in some takeaways that I'm already understanding from Barbara Brennan and what I was just talking about with this voluntary passivity, and what I was also talking about that I learned from the Elizabeth Haish book, Elizabeth Haish being an amazing Danish mystic that you should check out if you're not familiar with her, in her book Initiation. And it's just this idea that if you want to be able to practice and refine what Barbara Brennan calls high sense perception, right? And Gary Zukov talks about this in Seed of the Soul. He talks about how our next evolution as humans, he literally says the exact same thing as Barbara Brennan, how our next evolution of humans is to go beyond the 5 senses and to become what Gary Zukov calls multi-sensory humans, and what Barbara Brennan would just call humans who use high sense perception, or maybe healers, really, right? Once you master the art is what she would call it. So it's how we start to do that. And of course it's, especially if you're going to become a healer, or even like a certified healer, like in the way of like what Barbara Brennan is doing, which I really respect and I'm very interested in. Well, I'll just put it into this perspective. So here's what I realized. So I genuinely want to go to her school. Okay. It's a 4-year school. I'm sure a lot of you guys would be interested in it, to be honest. So if you haven't heard of the Barbara Brennan School of Hearing 4-year school, it's like $7,000 a year. You do most of the learning online, and then you meet in person 5 times a year for a week. And then there are a lot of modules that you do in person. And I think it's a very extensive training, and they're trying to get accredited in Florida. Anyway, so it begins this month, like October. And I don't think I'm going to be able to do it this year because I'm taking on a lot of new responsibilities at the barn and with horses and doing things here in Cody that I'm really excited about. But what I realized is every moment is my chance to start practicing this to see if I really want to go to this school, right? So it's like, and I do think, you know, to take it again to that like accredited level of healing, and obviously you're going to learn a lot and connect with a lot of people. Like if I was able to go to a school like that, that's amazing. But the point is, how do you start practicing high sense perception? How do you start practicing, you know, what Elizabeth Heish was sort of illustrating as a telepathy or sharing of energy? How do you start practicing being a multisensory human? By this like voluntary passivity, by surrender, by clearing out everything in order to receive. And I was looking up about, you know, and again, I'm a novice, you guys, and I know a lot of you guys know a lot more than me, so please share, but I was looking up differences this morning between Reiki and the Barbara Brennan School of Healing. And so just reading about, and there are a lot of similarities. Actually, I'll put a really good article in the about to this video that I just read this morning that was a guy illustrating the differences between the two sort of disciplines or pathways of energy healing. But it's talking about how at the basis is, you know, channeling impersonal energy, right? Like, because it's channeling divine energy. So it's like all of this ties in with letting go of the personal, with becoming the observer. And this is what Barbara Brennan describes when she describes like how she had her first awakenings and how she had these realizations. She describes that like her first times of becoming conscious of this and just thinking it was normal was when she would be out in nature and she would just learn to blend in. And when I heard her say that, I was like, yeah, because you know what I've noticed is when you're out in nature, if you want to see animals, you have to be still and quiet. If you're, you know, talking really loudly or going with other people or stomping through or being unconscious, probably caught up in your own shit, you know, caught up in your own narrative, caught up in the personal, you could just put it to that. If you're caught up in the personal, you're not blending in, you're not part of the environment that you actually are. Like you actually are. As far as this experience goes, like my feet could not be doing what they do for me without this earth. So my whole environment is part of me in that way, like literally, right? And I wouldn't be breathing, I wouldn't be able to speak without this space and this air, and I wouldn't be able to see without this light. So my point about that is this idea of blending in. It's like we become our environment, and when we just become part of it, we begin to see from a larger perspective because we are it. Like we step outside of the personal into the impersonal. And for me, this is this voluntary passivity, because it is in that moment of consciousness that we consciously choose to let go of our own narrative and become part of the larger picture. Like see ourselves as larger than that narrative, as larger than this body, as one with wherever we are, with whatever moment we are, within whatever moment we are in, everything that is a part of that is us. And so this idea of blending in, I don't know if you can hear those cranes in the background, sandhill cranes. So this idea of blending in, of becoming voluntarily passive, of clearing out, of becoming receptive, of becoming the observer, this is how we begin to practice high sense perception. It's a quietude. It's a quietude of being in a quietude, and also surrender. And again, it's letting go of that idea that like, I know what I need. Basically that I'm doing this at all, that I'm separate, but also that I know what I need to be thinking. I know what I need to be feeling. I know you know, the best way to do this, and the things that I need to think about and be worried about. And then you can't really, you're not gonna, if you're doing that in the woods, you're not gonna see the chipmunk that'll come out if you're just quiet. You're not gonna see the ducks on the river. You're not gonna see the hawk take off from even just in front of you. And, you know, to me, that's symbolic of, like, you know, in the case of Barbara Brennan, like, I'm not going to be able to see other people's auras if I'm always caught up in my own stuff. Like, I'm not really seeing anything. And I know, you know, this is larger sight, right? I'm not just talking about our physical senses, but I think the point is we can actually really heighten our physical senses as well, or maybe make them more energetic or spiritual. I don't really know the right way to say it, but all it takes, according to what I'm learning from Barbara Brennan right now, and what I feel I understand about life, is practice and dedication. Anyone can get better at high sense perception, and probably different, you know, and this is where, like, the clairvoyant, clairaudio stuff kind of comes in, or with each perception, is like different people probably have different strengths, right? But all we have to do is practice. If it's what we desire, if what we desire is to live more as a soul, a multisensory human, in high sense perception, in energetic perception, in truth, then all that is required at the beginning is to practice blending in, to become voluntarily passive, like to become soft and gentle and receptive, present. And only when we start to do that can we start to see the deeper or higher frequency realities that are already all around us. And the only reason we can't see them is because we haven't practiced, and we can't see that clear water because we're too muddy in all of our thoughts. And this is getting long, so I'll go now, but a couple of the last things I wanted to say were just, this is why I was saying, so maybe I will go to the school, maybe that is what I'll end up doing, but until then, I can begin to practice, and I can begin to allow myself to hone and discover whatever high sensory perception abilities I can. In the meantime, every person that comes to me is a moment that, instead of getting caught up in my narrative with that person right away, my personal narrative, that I can step into the impersonal. I can choose to blend in. I can choose voluntary passivity. I can open to what's really going on here, and with that person, but also with everything. And I can start to see what energy that person and myself and the whole situation is really bringing. So rather than being totally blinded by what I think the narrative is, just being voluntarily passive to see what is, everything that is before me in that moment, like for real. Do you guys get me? It's like we think we see what is, but when we're just running on all these thoughts, we're not seeing anything. We're hustling through the woods to go get exercise, talking on the phone as loud as we can, and we've missed everything that was there. And like, that's a metaphor for life. And the other metaphor that I wanted to share with us, and maybe some of you can relate to this, is, and I think this is a perfect metaphor for it. I don't know if you guys have noticed, but ever since Guatemala, and when I started meditating a lot, and I guess beginning to awaken, certain times, especially when I'm very relaxed, very passive, when I'm becoming part of my environment, blending in, you know, when you're like so comfy, like you're just part of it, like you're there, you're part of it, you've let go, you're not trying, and I'll unfocus my eyes and I start to see light bodies around things. And it's happened quite a bit now, and I've felt like I've started to see light bodies around people's heads. it only happens when I unfocus my eyes in this like certain way that I'm like, oh, am I just seeing things? You know what I mean? But I think that's a beautiful metaphor for this, is the unfocusing of the eyes, because it's like, oh, maybe my eyes can see in a different way than I even know if I just relax and blend in instead of trying to like focus on everything and see it clearly. Like, what would happen if I just like step back a little bit and kind of stop trying to see anything, and then it's like you can see something totally different, if that makes sense. So anyways, I love you guys. I hope you have a beautiful day. I'm so glad I got to record this video this morning. I'm off to the barn to go feed horses and clean stalls and get my day started on that level. And it's a beautiful day for all of us to practice high sense perception, being multisensory humans, being living electric love souls. And we can do that by bringing that consciousness of, again, for me, I love like the blending in or becoming part of your environment. I'm going to try and do that all day. It's this quietness, this perfectly being part of, it's like a perfectly being wherever you are, you know what I mean? And just with this, yep, voluntary passivity, surrender, clearing, and just to start to get curious of what I can see when I can truly observe without being caught up in my own discordant narratives, and just beginning to let those fall away and to blend in and see what there is to be revealed. I love you all. I can't wait to hear your comments. I'll talk to you soon. Virginia Schmidt signing off.